Media fact-checker. Hawaii flooding and dam failure crisis with evacuations across Oahu and Maui. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. More than 4,000 people were ordered to evacuate in Waialua and Haliwa, Oahu, due to flooding, ABC, Guardian. The 120-year-old Wahiawa Dam on Oahu is at risk of imminent failure and water was actively running over its spillway at 1,500 gallons per second, ABC, Guardian. Hawaii Governor Josh Green activated the Hawaii National Guard to respond to the flooding, ABC, Guardian. Northern Oahu was under a flash flood warning with widespread life-threatening flash flooding reported by the National Weather Service, ABC, Guardian. Evacuation orders were issued for Lahaina neighborhoods on Maui due to retention basins nearing capacity, ABC, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports 4,000 people evacuated while Guardian states 5,500 people were under evacuation orders. ABC mentions an evacuation advisory, not an order, for Lahaina while Guardian says authorities upgraded it to a warning. ABC states no immediate reports of deaths or injuries, but Guardian does not specify the exact number of homes damaged. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Elderly woman dies in Tasmanian boating accident caused by another vessel's wake. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A woman in her 70s died after being thrown overboard in a boating incident near Marion Bay, Tasmania, on Wednesday at 11:45 a.m. 4 adults, all known to each other, were on a 4.5-meter fiberglass half-cabin runabout in the Marion Narrows waterway. The boat was struck by a wave or chop from another vessel, causing 3 occupants to fall into the water. 2 males were pulled to safety by a nearby vessel. The third person, the deceased woman, could not be located initially. A large-scale search and rescue operation was launched, and the woman's body was later recovered by police. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC describes the boat as a 4.5-meter fiberglass half-cabin runabout, while News Kamau simply calls it a 4.5m recreational vessel with a fiberglass hull. ABC mentions initial suggestions were that the boat had capsized, which is not present in any WSOMEU's account. News Kamau explicitly thanks the public for their assistance in a more detailed manner than ABC. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Teen stabbing incident at Melbourne shopping centre and related crime updates. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 25-year-old woman was stabbed while walking to work at M-City Shopping Centre, Clayton, around 7:30 to 7:50 a.m. on Thursday. A 16-year-old boy was arrested and charged for the stabbing, occurring inside the shopping centre on Blackburn Road. The victim was taken to hospital with upper body injuries and remains in a serious but stable condition. A passerby called 000-000 after the incident and assisted the victim. The offender fled the scene after the stabbing and was later arrested at a medical centre in Clayton. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC does not mention the suspect was on bail before the attack, while Thege explicitly states this. ABC does not specify the victim's hometown, Mount Waverley, or hospital, the Alfred, which Thege provides. Thege reports the victim was stabbed at approximately 7:50 a.m., while ABC states it was around 7:30 a.m. This story was covered by ABC News and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Suspicious death of a 60-year-old man in Jung, Victoria, linked to a knifepoint arrest in Horsham. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A man's body was found beside the Henty Highway in Jung, Victoria, just after 9 a.m. on Monday, near Finlayson Road on the eastern side of the highway. The victim was believed to be about 60 years old but had yet to be formally identified. Victoria police are treating the death as suspicious and the homicide squad is investigating. A 49-year-old man from Minyip was arrested in Horsham around 11 p.m. on Monday after an erratic behavior incident involving a knife. The arrested man was taken to hospital and is expected to be interviewed by homicide detectives. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the sources. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Nicola Olyslagers shares silver in women's high jump at World Athletics Indoor Championships. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nicola Olyslagers finished in a three-way share of second place in the women's high jump at the World Indoor Championships in Torun, Poland. Olyslagers cleared 1.99 meters to share silver with Angelina Topic, Serbia, and Yulia Levchenko, Ukraine. Yaroslava Mahuchik, Ukraine, won gold with a clearance of 2.01 meters. All top four athletes cleared 1.99 meters on their first attempt. Eleanor Patterson, Australia, finished seventh with a clearance of 1.93 meters. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Olyslagers cleared 1.99 m to share silver with two others, while Guardian confirms the same but adds Olyslagers was just a little surprised by being among them. ABC reports Eleanor Patterson's time as 1.93 m, while Guardian states she struggled to get over 1.93 m without specifying her final height. ABC lists Jess Hull's time as 4 minutes and 12.45 seconds and Adam Spencer's as 3 minutes and 40.79 seconds, but Guardian does not mention these details. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Kangaroo Island Council proposes pet cat ban to eradicate feral cats by 2030. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Kangaroo Island Council is considering a last cat policy to ban new pet cats from being introduced to the island. Mayor Michael Pengelly supports the last cat policy and stated it would not immediately remove existing pet cats from owners. The council aims to eradicate all feral cats from Kangaroo Island by 2030. The Dudley Peninsula project on Kangaroo Island has removed 2,800 feral cats, leaving around 150 remaining. Feral cats on Kangaroo Island have predated over 50 native species, including the Kangaroo Island dunnart and penguin colonies. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reported Mayor Pengelly said the last cat policy is not that far advanced yet, while Newscomau did not include this specific phrasing. ABC mentioned the council's goal is no cats on Kangaroo Island explicitly, but Newscomau did not include this exact phrasing. ABC included a quote from Mayor Pengelly about the hard core of people who disagree with the policy, but Newscomau did not mention this. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Danish royals King Frederik and Queen Mary's first official state visit to Australia in 40 years. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Queen Mary was born in Tasmania's Hobart suburb of Tauranga in 1972 and attended the University of Tasmania. The royal couple's visit began on Saturday, the 10th of August, 2024, with a stop at Uluru-Kata Tjuta National Park. On Monday, the 12th of August, 2024, King Frederik and Queen Mary visited the Australian War Memorial in Canberra, laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier and pausing at the Roll of Honour for Flying Officer Henry James Brock, Tasmanian-born, killed 1944, and Flying Officer Geoffrey Herbert Brandon Slynn, killed over Denmark, 1944. The royal couple's visit to Australia is their first official state visit since King Frederik ascended the throne in January 2024. Queen Mary and King Frederik met then Crown Prince Frederik at the Slip-In Bar in Sydney during the 2000 Olympics, where they later married in 2004. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC both mention the royal couple's visit to the War Memorial on Monday, but only The Guardian specifies the exact time of arrival, just as Canberra snapped out of an unseasonal chilly spell. News Kamau states Queen Mary will give a speech on sustainable transformation in Melbourne, while ABC does not mention this speech but focuses on renewable energy and mental health engagements instead. The Guardian highlights the Danish royals' visit to a bushwalk at Uluru Kata Tjuta as part of their itinerary, but ABC does not mention this specific activity, only their visit to the Uluru Kata Tjuta Cultural Centre. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's fuel crisis amid Middle East conflict and National Cabinet response. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese will chair a National Cabinet meeting on Thursday, 2024 date unspecified, in Tasmania to coordinate fuel supply responses across states and territories. The federal government has released about 6 days' worth of petrol and 5 days' worth of diesel from its emergency stockpile as part of an internationally coordinated response to the Strait of Hormuz blockade. Fuel prices have risen sharply globally due to Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which carries about 20% of the world's oil supply. The government temporarily lowered fuel standards to allow onshore refineries to redirect supplies into the local market, injecting an extra 100 million litres per month for 60 days. Transport Minister Catherine King is holding a fuel security roundtable with transport industry stakeholders on Wednesday. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports the government warned inflation could peak in the mid to high fours, while no other source mentions this specific inflation forecast. The Guardian states the government has directed fuel companies to release nearly 1/5 of reserve supplies, while ABC states the release is about 6 days' worth of petrol and 5 days of diesel, no percentage given. ABC mentions the government has already released 6 days' worth of petrol and 5 days' worth of diesel, but The Guardian does not specify the exact duration of the release. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Iran's closure threat and disruption of the Strait of Hormuz during US-Israel war. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Strait of Hormuz is a 30-kilometer wide waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea, with its narrowest point at 3.2 kilometers wide between Iran and Oman. Iran's Revolutionary Guard, IRGC, announced in March 2024 that all navigating through the Strait of Hormuz is forbidden, effectively halting or severely restricting maritime traffic. Over 2,000 ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz in a 15-day period in early February 2024, but only 166 vessels did so in the same period in early March 2024. Iran has targeted vessels in at least 20 confirmed incidents since March 1, 2024, using drones, unmanned speedboats, and anti-ship missiles. The U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright stated in March 2024 that it is not safe for shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Iran is rerouting ships through Iranian territorial waters, north of Frederik Island, to assert control, but The Guardian does not mention this rerouting detail. ABC states that Iran's closure began shortly after the US-Israel war started in March 2024, while The Guardian's podcast does not specify a timeline for when the closure was announced or enforced. ABC cites a 20% global oil flow figure through the Strait of Hormuz, while The Guardian also uses this figure but does not attribute it to a specific source or study. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump criticizes Australia and NATO allies for not supporting US military operations against Iran. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump publicly named Australia, Japan, South Korea, and NATO as countries whose help the US no longer need or desire in the Iran war. ABC, Guardian, The Age, news.com.au, SMH. Transport Minister Catherine King confirmed Australia would not send naval support to the Strait of Hormuz. ABC, Guardian, news.com.au, SMH. Iran has effectively blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, disrupting global oil supply and causing fuel price surges. ABC, Guardian, The Age, News.com.au, SMH. Trump previously called on allies to help reclaim the Strait of Hormuz but did not explicitly mention Australia in those requests. ABC, Guardian, The Age, News.com.au. The US and Israeli military campaign against Iran has caused overwhelming damage to Iran's missile stocks, Navy, Air Force, and regime leadership. The Age, SMH. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and Guardian report Australia has not received a formal request for naval assistance, but The Age and SMH do not explicitly contradict this, only report Trump's broader statements about allies. The Guardian reports Trump said he was very surprised Australia declined to send troops, while ABC and The Age emphasize Australia's position of not being formally asked or consulted. The Guardian mentions Trump's previous public requests for help included China, Japan, and South Korea, but not Australia, while ABC and The Age clarify Trump named Australia in his latest outburst but not in earlier statements. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, News.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Iranian women's soccer team asylum crisis during Women's Asian Cup in Australia. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 7 Iranian women's soccer team members, including one staff member, were granted humanitarian visas by Australia on March 10, 2024, during the Women's Asian Cup in Sydney. 5 of the 7 asylum seekers, including Captain Zahra Ganbari, later withdrew their claims and returned to Iran via Malaysia, Oman, and Turkey, arriving in early April 2024. 2 players, Fatma Pasandadeh and Atfef Ramazanisadeh, remained in Australia and began training with Brisbane Roar's A-League women's squad. The team's refusal to sing Iran's national anthem before their opening match on March 10 sparked condemnation from Iranian state media, with presenter Mohammad Reza Shahbazi labeling them wartime traitors on March 11. The Iranian Football Association president Mehdi Taj, a former IRGC intelligence officer, was re-elected in 2022 and 2025 and is described as having strong regime ties by multiple sources. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and News.com.au claim Iranian diaspora activists and former players allege the team staff member granted asylum, Zahra Soltan Moshkeka, relayed threats from Iranian officials, but Australian government sources deny these claims have any basis. News.com.au and The Guardian report that Iranian families of the players were threatened with property seizures or interrogations if they defected, while Iranian officials dismiss these as fabrications and frame the returns as voluntary and patriotic. The Guardian states the players were given repeated chances to reconsider returning, while ABC emphasizes the Australian government could not remove the context of their difficult decisions, implying external pressure was unavoidable. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and News.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Federal judge blocks Pentagon's press access restrictions under Trump administration's policy. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A federal judge, Paul Friedman, blocked key portions of the Pentagon's press access policy introduced in October 2025, ruling it unconstitutional under the First Amendment. The policy prohibited journalists from soliciting information the Pentagon did not directly provide and allowed revocation of credentials for non-compliant outlets. Only one of 56 news outlets in the Pentagon Press Association agreed to sign the new policy, leading to the loss of passes for most major outlets including the New York Times, Washington Post, and AP. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth approved the policy change in October 2025, and the Pentagon assembled a new press corps consisting of pro-Trump outlets after the exodus of mainstream reporters. The Trump administration plans to appeal the judge's ruling, with Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell stating they disagree with the decision. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the policy prohibited journalists from soliciting information the Pentagon did not directly provide, while ABC frames it as prohibiting journalists from seeking unauthorized information without specifying the Pentagon's role in authorization. The Guardian mentions the Pentagon assembled a new press corps of pro-Trump outlets and media personalities as evidence of viewpoint-based restrictions, but ABC does not explicitly state this as a direct consequence of the policy. The Guardian highlights that Justice Department lawyers acknowledged the policy was partly subjective, while ABC does not include this acknowledgement in its reporting. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 2 individuals arrested for attempting to enter UK's Farslane nuclear submarine base. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 2 people, a 34-year-old Iranian man and a 31-year-old Romanian woman, were arrested on the 19th of March, 2026 after attempting to enter HM Naval Base Clyde, Farslane, Scotland, around 5 p.m. The base houses the UK's Trident nuclear submarines and is not open to the public. Police Scotland confirmed the arrests and stated inquiries were ongoing, with the pair due to appear in Dumbarton Sheriff Court, Guardian, or no further comment given, Royal Navy. The incident occurred on Thursday the 19th of March, 2026, with the man identified as Iranian and the woman's nationality reported as Romanian, Guardian ABC. The Royal Navy previously stated 2 people unsuccessfully tried to enter the base, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the woman's nationality is Romanian, while ABC only reports the man is Iranian and the woman's nationality is unknown. The Guardian mentions the incident is not considered particularly serious by the MOD, but ABC does not provide this assessment. The Guardian cites The Sun for the claim the pair acted suspiciously, but ABC does not reference this detail. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 2026 Six Nations Rugby Tournament Analysis and Player Rankings. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Louis Bielbayari scored a record 9 tries in a single Six Nations season, including 4 against England, and became the first player to score in every game in successive championships. Thomas Ramos scored the decisive final winning penalty for France against England in Paris, marking his 4th successive championship as top point scorer and placing him atop France's all-time list. Rhys Carr scored a try in 3 successive test matches, becoming only the 6th prop in history to do so, and was Wales's leading point scorer in the 2026 Six Nations. Tommaso Menoncello scored a solo try in Italy's historic win over England and was praised for his speed, strength, and commitment as the best centre in Europe. Finn Russell was pivotal in Scotland's home wins over England and France, including a quick restart for Darcy Graham's crucial late try in Cardiff. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 calls Louis Bielbayari the nearest thing to a cheat code in modern rugby, while Article 2 repeatedly emphasises Thomas Ramos as the greatest goal kicker the game has ever seen and the player of the tournament in multiple selections. Article 1 lists the France-England final as 48-46, while Article 2 does not specify the exact score but confirms it was a classic Parisian conclusion and breathless stuff. Article 1 describes the Scotland-France match as 50-40, while Article 2 refers to it as a 90-point game without specifying the exact score. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump's response to Supreme Court tariff ruling and trade policy shifts. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump claimed on Truth Social he has the absolute right to impose new tariffs after the Supreme Court ruled many of his 2023 tariffs were illegal, February 2024 ruling. The Supreme Court found the Trump administration lacked sufficient legal justification for using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, for many tariffs imposed on countries worldwide. Trump imposed 10% tariffs on goods from much of the world under Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act, which expire in July 2024. Trump vowed to raise the temporary 10% tariffs to 15% but has yet to do so. US officials launched trade investigations last week to potentially impose new permanent tariffs replacing the repealed ones. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 mentions Trump's temporary 10% tariffs under Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act expire in July 2024, but Article 2 does not specify an expiration date for these tariffs. Article 1 states Trump's meeting with Xi Jinping is not at risk but could be delayed, while Article 2 frames it as may be delayed without mentioning it being not at risk. Article 1 includes Trump's specific schedule for meetings with VP Vance, Kennedy Center, and Japan ambassador, while Article 2 omits these details entirely. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Leadership crisis and potential spill in Victorian Labour Party ahead of 2024 election. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jacinta Allan is Victorian Premier and faces leadership spill speculation ahead of the November 2024 state election. Her net approval rating is -37%, Demos AU poll in Herald Sun, and 69% of coalition voters would direct preferences to One Nation over Labour, Redbridge survey for Australian Financial Review. Deputy Premier Ben Carroll, Right Faction, and Transport Infrastructure Minister Gabrielle Williams, Left Faction, are the most likely leadership contenders. Allan became Victorian Premier in September 2023 after succeeding Daniel Andrews. Labour's 2023 state election result was better than expected, temporarily easing leadership pressure on Allan. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports a grouping of socialist left MPs within the southeast are driving the push for a leadership change, but these MPs deny it. The Age says a factional chief offered the view that anyone other than Allan would lead the party to a better result, while ABC states no one has suggested anyone was counting numbers. The Guardian claims a push for a leadership change is underway with more than a dozen sources confirming it, but ABC says no one has approached ministers to canvass a change. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Sri Lanka and Asia's fuel crisis due to Iran-US-Israel war blocking Strait of Hormuz. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Sri Lanka introduced a 4-day work week for state institutions, schools, and universities starting Wednesday, local time, to conserve fuel, Newskamau, ABC, Guardian. Iran blocked the Strait of Hormuz on February 28, 2024, after US-Israeli airstrikes, cutting 20 to 25% of global oil supply and disrupting 80% of Asia's crude oil and LNG, Newskamau, ABC, Guardian. Sri Lanka's fuel rationing limits motorists to 15 litres of petrol-diesel per week, with public transport allocated up to 200 litres, Newskamau, ABC, Guardian. Sri Lanka's petrol and diesel reserves will last nearly 6 weeks, but officials warn prolonged Middle East conflict could collapse recovery efforts post-2022 debt default, Newskamau, ABC, Guardian. President Anura Kumara Dissanayake urged private sector to adopt Wednesdays as holidays and civil servants to work from home, Newskamau, ABC, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. Newskamau states 80% of Asia's crude oil and LNG passes through the Strait of Hormuz, while ABC and Guardian cite 80% for crude oil only, not LNG. ABC reports Sri Lanka's fuel rationing limits motorbikes to 5 litres, but Newskamau and Guardian only mention 15 litres for cars, no motorbike specifics. Guardian claims Pakistan relies on 85% of its energy from the Strait of Hormuz, while Newskamau and ABC do not specify this exact percentage. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.